and play on 2nd and 10. That's his youth right there.
Tagovailoa trying to make up for it. Fires to the end zone. Touchdown! Alabama wins!
Today, I'll be continuing with my college football game-by-game prediction and roster discussion videos. Today, I'll be doing the Duke Blue Devils. Head coach Manny Diaz is first recruiting class in 2025, ranked at 34th in the country. They didn't have any five-star players, but they did have three four-star players. He enters his second season as Duke's head coach. Last season, they went 9-4, which was impressive by him because Duke wasn't even expected to make a bowl game last year. And I think he's one of the best defensive minds in college football. He was the defensive coordinator at Penn State for the 2 years before he became Duke's head coach and did a really good job with their defense and did a really good job with Duke's defense last season. That's why they won 9 games. And he's been a head coach before he was at Duke. Right before he was Penn State's defensive coordinator, he was the head coach at Miami for 3 seasons, but he only went 21-15 there. Last season was for sure his best coaching job. On the offensive side of the ball, they were not very good here last year. They averaged only 22.2 points per game. I think they'll be better than that this year, but still not very good. At quarterback, they'll have a new transfer quarterback. He comes from Tulane, Darian Mintz. He started all 13 games at quarterback for Tulane last year and had a pretty good season, throwing for 2,723 yards and 22 touchdown passes. And he averaged a really good 9.5 yards per throw and completed a accurate 65.9% of his passes. And at wide receiver, I think this will be one of the better wide receiver rooms in the ACC. Now they do lose their best one, Jordan Moore, who's off to the NFL, but they do get back Quusine Brown, who had last year 41 catches for 445 and 2 touchdowns, averaging 10.9 a catch, and Samar Higgins, who had last season 47 catches for 413 and also 3 touchdowns, but only averaged 8.8 yards per catch. And they bring in two transfer wide receivers. They bring in Edrell Anthony from Oklahoma. He didn't play at all last season because of an injury, and he only played the first 6 games of the 2023 season because of a season-ending injury. That was his only time at Oklahoma. But in the first half of the 2023 season, he was one of Dylan Gabriel's top wide receivers. That season, he had 27 catches for 429 and a touchdown, averaging at 15.9 in those 6 games. I think he'll be good for Duke. And they bring in a transfer wide receiver from Harvard. His name is Cooper Barkade, and he did have in 10 games last year 63 catches for 1,084 yards and 11 touchdowns, averaging 17.2 yards per catch. But doing that in the Power Four is going to be a lot harder than it would be at Harvard because that's a little team. And their running back room, though, is concerning. They were a terrible running team last year. They ranked 127th in rushing, averaging only 92.5 rushing yards per game. And they didn't bring any good transfer running backs. That was really because, though, of their offensive line being so bad in run blocking. They only averaged at 3.2 yards per run. But now their pass protection was good. They only gave up 12 sacks all season, and they do have four starters coming back on their offensive line, but they're going to have to play a lot better in run blocking if they're going to improve on last year's record, most likely. So now on the defensive side, this is the good part of Duke's roster. They last year only gave up on average 21.5 points per game, and I think they'll probably be even better than that this year. They get three out of four starters back on their defensive line that are all good players. They've got Wesley Williams, who had last season 48 tackles, at 7.5 sacks, two pass breakups, a forced fumble, and 17 total quarterback pressures. And Vincent Anthony, who had in 12 games 25 tackles and 5 sacks and 32 total quarterback pressures and three pass breakups. And Aaron Hall, who had last season 41 tackles and 3.5 sacks and two pass breakups and 10 total quarterback pressures. And at linebacker, they get back Trey Freeman, a 2-year starter for them at linebacker, who had last season 67 tackles and two interceptions and two pass breakups and a forced fumble. And they've got Nick Morris, who missed pretty much all of last season because of a season-ending injury in the opener. But in 2023, he only started 5 games and played it all 13 games, though, on what was Mike Elko's defense that year, and had 61 tackles and a sack. He should be pretty good for Duke this year. And then in the secondary, they've got Chandler Rivers coming back at cornerback, one of the best cornerbacks in the country, a 2-year starter for Duke at corner. Last season, he had 54 tackles and nine pass breakups and three interceptions, one for a touchdown and two forced fumbles and a sack and four total quarterback pressures. Here's a clip of that pick six by him.
Brocklet has missed on his last four. Pressure picked up, and it's intercepted by Chandler Rivers to the house. Pick six.
And at safety, they're going to be really good. They've got Terry Moore coming back, who had last season 71 tackles, six pass breakups, and four interceptions, and two forced fumbles, and a sack. He's one of the ACC's best at safeties. And then they've got Deshaun Stone, a rotational player last season, but he played in all 13 games and did a good job for Duke. He had last season 55 tackles and an interception and a pass breakup and two forced fumbles and a quarterback pressure. He'll be a full-time starter at safety most likely this season. And they bring in a good safety from Sam Houston State, which is in Conference USA, which is Group of Five. His name is Caleb Weaver. He had last season 97 tackles and six pass breakups and four interceptions and a quarterback pressure and a forced fumble. So now for the game by game predictions, starting with E-line, this should be a big blowout win for Duke, where they get to play their second string at halftime. So now Illinois. Duke, I think, has a much better defensive line than Illinois does, but the rest of the defense, I'd say Illinois is about even with Duke. Now, Illinois' running backs and offensive line are better than Duke's, but Duke's defensive line, I think, can slow that uh, run game up by Illinois down. And Luke Altmaier is just as good of a quarterback as the transfer that Duke brought in, but the Duke transfer, Darian Mensah, will have a much better wide receiver room to throw to, I think, than Altmaier will. This is really an even matchup, in my opinion. So it really just came down to home field advantage for me, and Duke has that. So that's why I'm picking Duke. So now on the road at Tulane, this is probably going to be a close one. I could see Duke losing this game. So even though Duke has Tulane's quarterback now, Tulane got Retzloff from BYU, so they've actually upgraded at quarterback. But they do lose Mario Williams, the wide receiver they brought in last year from USC, who had over 1,000 yards receiving last year, and then they lose the running back Mackay Hughes, who transferred to Oregon, who had over 1,400 rushing yards last season, and they've only got three starters coming back on defense. I do think that Duke does win this game. So now NC State, a team that offensively may be as good as Duke, because Duke's offense isn't going to be anything amazing this year, but defensively, NC State does have a couple of good linebackers, but their defensive line and secondary, I think, is going to be a big mismatch. I think that makes the difference and gets Duke the win. So now on the road at Syracuse, a team that only has five starters coming back on their whole team, but the coach there, Fran Brown, I don't think's an idiot. He might eventually, I think, be one of college football's better coaches. He did a good job with the roster last year, going 10-3. Now, I do think Syracuse will take a big step back this year, but I don't think they'll be terrible. They'll probably still make a bowl game, but Syracuse is not going to be very good on either side of the ball. I don't think that Duke will have a big advantage over them defensively. I think their defense will dominate in this game and get Duke the win. And what is a game that they could possibly lose. It might be pretty close. On the road at California, a game that really the only bad thing for Duke will be the travel distance, because California's stadium is like a high school stadium, and California, I think, is going to be one of the worst Power Four teams this season, and all of the magazines agree with me on that. They only have six starters coming back on their team, and when you recruit outside the top 50 like California does, that usually means a disaster is coming. I think Duke's defense will dominate in this game and get them the win. So now at Georgia Tech, Brent Key, the coach there, I think is a good coach, and they've got a better offense, I think, than Duke does. Their wide receivers are good too, and their quarterback, I think, is even better than what Duke has. And their offensive line and running game, I think, is much better than Duke's. But good news for Duke is their defensive line, I think, can slow down that Georgia Tech run game and force Georgia Tech to have to throw the football more than they like to. And I think Duke's secondary can slow that down too. Now, Georgia Tech's secondary, I'd say, is just as good as Duke's is probably. But Georgia Tech, I think, is a better team than Duke. But home field advantage going to Duke is just enough for me to give Duke the win here in a very close game, most likely. So now on the road at Clemson. So this is not a good matchup for Duke. Duke is a team that again is going to lean heavily on their defense, and in this game, their opponent will have an even better defense than they do, and they've got a much better quarterback than Duke does, and an even better wide receiver room. And while Clemson doesn't have a proven running back on their roster either, they've got a much better offensive line, so I think they'll have an advantage in the run game too. I think Clemson wins this game by a couple of scores. So now on the road at Connecticut, this should be a blowout win for Duke, but when I was doing my research for this video, I saw they played last year and Duke only won by 5, but this isn't a game that Duke is in really any danger of losing. So now Virginia, another team like California that I think is going to be one of the worst Power Four teams. Duke's defense, I think, will dominate in this game and get them the win. So now on the road against a bad North Carolina team with a coach that doesn't know what he's doing and will get fired or resign in just a couple of years. But it wouldn't shock me if North Carolina were to win this game because it is on the road. And while North Carolina isn't really what you consider to be a tough place to play, it's Duke, and they're not a real talented team either. But Duke didn't lose to any bad teams last year. Their 4 losses were to SMU, which was a good team, Miami, which was a good team, and Georgia Tech, which was a decent team, and then Ole Miss in the bowl game, which was a good team. And Duke's defense, I think, is much better than North Carolina's, and I think that will be enough to get them through this one in what could be a pretty close game. So now, Wake Forest, a team that only has 6 starters coming back and doesn't even recruit inside the top 50, which means they're probably going to be terrible again. Their defense is always terrible, and their offense has been too. Since Sam Hartman left them. And Duke's defense should dominate in this one, get them this win. I've got Duke finishing the season at 11-1 overall and 7-1 in the conference. But I'm not really as high on Duke as it appears looking at this prediction because Duke has a very easy schedule. They do play Illinois and Georgia Tech, which are decent teams, but they get both of those at home. And then, even though they play Clemson, they avoid SMU and Louisville and Miami, who are all, I think, better teams than Duke, but have tougher schedules than Duke does. So this would probably get Duke into the ACC championship game, but I'll go and tell you they won't win it if they make it there. But that will be it with this video, and please subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon.